Well, last night I ended up staying up far later than I wanted to because the Inferno dungeons went on the PTR. Was it worth staying up late for? Arguably, no, not really at all, but also I'm not particularly surprised. Now, I'm not dragging this video out any longer than it needs to be, so what are we going to talk about? The first thing will be, what are Inferno dungeons? What changes from the regular heroics, and what do you get from them? What's good about them, and what's bad about them? What can you buy with the new currency that you get from doing these Inferno dungeons? Some examples of what your gear would look like if you use these Inferno dungeons, along with obviously Valor points, Justice points, etc., to get yourself ready for Firelands. And finally, is there anything Blizzard have missed? I think we all know the answer to that one. As in, yes, of course there is. So, okay, firstly, what are the Inferno dungeons? So this is the original Phase 1 heroic dungeons. So basically everything other than Zul'Gurub and Zul'Aman. Now, the only thing that actually changes is everything in these dungeons should have a buff that gives them 25% more damage and 100% more health. Now, it was very late, so I've only done Grimbatol, but I was talking to people on stream that was doing other dungeons, and it seems the same for all of them. Not everything's actually getting the buff. So the first couple of bosses, as an example, in Grimbatol were exactly the same as they were on Heroic, and much of the trash was also missing the buff. Now, I kind of get in Grimbatol the trash that you're meant to be killing with the Drakes not actually getting the buff because they didn't have the buff. But at the same time, it would actually make the dungeon more difficult if you couldn't just erase all the trash on the Drakes and you actually had to fight them, you know, from 50% health onwards or something. So whether this is just an oversight or not, and they are meant to have the buff, I don't know. But basically, that's it. It's just 25% more damage and 100% more health. Now, what Blizzard actually said is they wanted to raise the challenge to a point where, particularly for characters close to eye level 3, 4, 6 gear, the mechanics need to be considered once again. So whereas when we go back to Alpha dungeons in Wrath of the Lich King, they actually added mechanics to the dungeons, or affixes, or whatever you want to refer to them as, they didn't want to do it this time because they said that they wanted it to be close to sort of pre-nerf heroic states. Now, in my opinion, it just seems a little bit lazy, but we'll get into that when I talk about what I think's good and what's bad about them. From each boss, you're going to get 2 of the new currency, which are called Fissure Stone Fragments. Now, to avoid people skipping past bosses, providing that you kill all of the bosses in the instance, when you kill the last boss, he drops 3 extras. So you're going to get 5 from the last boss and 2 from all the other bosses you kill, assuming you do a full clear. So from Grimbatol as an example, we got 11 Fissure Stone Fragments, which when we look at the prices of stuff, that's actually pretty generous. It's a decent amount that you're getting. It's not going to feel like too much of a grind. If you're wondering about what the bosses their self drop, they only drop the standard normal 3, 4, 6 gear that they normally drop. Now we're going to go into what's good and what's bad, and I'm going to start with that point straight away as what's bad. To get in these Inferno Protocol dungeons, you need to have the same item level as what you need to be able to get into Zul'Gurub and Zul'Aman, which is 3, 4, 6 eye level. Now, Zul'Gurub and Zul'Aman, every boss drops epic 3, 5, 3 gear, and these Inferno Protocol dungeons really are meant to be there as catch-up gear. So yes, while you're getting the new currency, that's great. You're still going to have to do, I don't know, let's say 3 of these before you can buy an item. And when we actually get to the items, you'll understand that when I say 3 of these, you're going to be buying an item that will be purely RNG on what you get. So I think the last bosses, as a bare minimum, should be dropping 3, 5, 9 gear, and really it should be the more difficult pieces to obtain, like bracers and things like that, but we will get more onto the gear in a minute. Before I get onto more what's bad with them, what's good with them, honestly, there's only 2 things I can say that's good about them, and I'm trying not to be negative about these, but Blizzard always find a way of letting me down. But anyway, the good things about them is it's going to be nice for someone who's gearing a character to not feel like they're stuck in Zul'Gurub and Zul'Aman. You know, at the end of the day, I've just dinged 85 on a Shaman, and it's going to be my main throughout Firelands and Dragon Soul, and I was getting bored just doing like back-to-back ZA, ZG constantly. So it's going to be nice to have some variety. That's one thing that's good about them. And the other thing that's good about them is the fact that they do drop a generous amount of currency. Getting on average 11 plus of the new currency on average is pretty decent. But like I say, the bad things is the fact that there's no new abilities, and they had the perfect opportunity to take some inspiration from retail, and they could have just had something like Ragnaros every couple of minutes does something. So maybe you've got to absorb some fireballs, or you've got to dispel, or you've got to all stand in something, or a mob gets empowered that you need to kill. You know, it could have been something really basic that doesn't happen the whole way through the dungeon. It's just like the Xalatath affixes that we've got in retail. Something like that would have just spiced these up quite a lot. And they wouldn't have even needed to do many of them. They could have made like 2 and they just rotate each week. That's it. Job's a good one. Didn't need to make it dungeon specific, just completely Inferno dungeon wide. That is just my opinion, but I feel like just buffing the damage by 25% and the health by 100% really don't make these feel any more exciting than they did, I don't know, 5 months ago when it first came out. And then, like I've already said, the other bad thing is the fact that loot has been completely untouched. Getting exactly the same loot as what we was getting from them 5 months ago, it just feels very lackluster as well. It could have been like the alpha dungeons where we was getting Nax 10 gear, as an example. Getting 359 gear drop, even if it was in a chest at the end. So a little bit, again, like M+, for example. At the end, there's a chest, and you might get 2 items out of it. So you're not getting massive amounts of 359 gear, but just something at the end, you know, a chance at a weapon or a trinket or just something that you can use. Because ultimately, the only reason you're doing these dungeons is for the currency, because every single item that drops in these, you don't want to be using. It's as simple as that. So let's move on to what you can buy. Now, first of all, you can get the normal tier head and the normal tier shoulders. These are the 359 version, not the 372s. The big one that everyone will be quite pleased about, but maybe not really pleased about, is the items that come from Throne. Now, if you look in the dungeon journal, you'll see Gale Rouser belt, so that's leather. You've got Lightning Well belt, which is mail. You've got Sky Strider belt, which is plate. So you need to know which one is which. And then obviously the actual stats that you're going to get on them is completely random. And that looks like it's going to be exactly what the case is with these. And that's also why they're very cheap, because they're only 28 and they're all 28. And you can get a cloak, neck, belt, ring, legs. It's a decent amount of items that you're going to be able to get from these, but you are hoping that when you open the bag, it's got the stats on that you want. Now, the reason that I don't think this is terrible is because it's going to keep people that are quite unlucky continuing to do them and not just do like 3 Inferno dungeons, get that belt that they was missing, and then jobs are good. And they've added a chance at the 3 mounts dropping from these as well, the Drakes, which is Drake of the North Wind, Vitreous Stone Drake, and Drake of the South Wind. So again, gives you a bit of reason to not feel bad when you don't get the exact item roll you want, because you might get a mount in the bag. Now, the reason it's good that you can get the normal head and shoulders tier token is because then you can get a pair of the 372 legs, because these are the heroic 372 items. So the reason these have been added is so it gives people a chance to be able to actually get these items that they've been chasing since week 1, and a very easy way, obviously, for people that are re-rolling or people that have just come back to the game or whatever to get decent 372 gear. Because as a fresh character or a re-roll, you're just going to take whatever stats you get and move on to the next piece. And then maybe once you've spent all of the Fisher Stones on whatever you need, you'll then go back and try and get a better re-roll on the items that you've already bought. But outside of the bits that you can get that come from Throne, you've got non-weapon Nefarian loot. That includes the trinket as well. So basically any of the heroic items that drop from Nefarian, you're going to be able to get, just not the weapons. You've got the big BWD trinkets like Bell, Heart of Rage, and Symbiotic Worm. And then you've got the 379 Sinestra loot as well. So you can get some pretty decent gear when you think about being able to get 5 pieces, being neck, cape, ring, belt, and legs, just from the satchels. And then class depending, you can fill in some Nef gear, pick up some trinkets, and grab yourself even some 379 gear from Sinestra. The only thing I would say here is a little bit more thought could go into what needs adding, and hopefully Blizzard see this and they make just a couple of minor changes to these bits of gear. Big shout out to Superhuman Jesse who put all these lists together and sent me them over, but these are just some good examples of what your gear is going to look like if you want to just try and get the best gear that you can before Firelands, and you're a fresh character that's not going to raid heroic. Basically everyone's going to get the 4 set. So obviously you're going to be able to get the hands and the chest for justice points, because they'll change to justice points when Inferno dungeons actually go live. And then you're going to use your Fisher Stones on the head and the shoulders This means that then you're going to be able to get the 372 legs. Pretty much everybody will get the 372 belt, the 372 neck in most cases, but in this case, obviously, this is the Sinestra neck, and obviously you're going to grab one of the rings as well. Now, any strength plate user is going to be laughing because you can get braces that are Matrador from the vendor with the new currency that comes from Sinestra. However, pretty much every other class is either going to have to do Zul'Gurub and Zolaman to try and get a pair of braces, buy some cloth BOE braces off the auction house, or just be stuck with a blue item or something like that. It don't really matter what class we look at. If you don't wear plate, you're kind of shafted. Now, what is going to happen at the same time, though, is for 1250 Valor points, you're going to be able to get bind on equipped bracers, and this is for every class. So it's not a big deal that you can't get bracers from the Inferno dungeons, because these Valor bracers will be being sold in trade chat. They'll be on the auction house. Like, people who have got multiple alts will just be, well, like me, will be getting Valor Cap just to buy these bracers. But on the basis we already know that 378 BOE bracers are coming, does it not make sense to actually stick a few pairs of 372 bracers on here for leather wearers, for cloth wearers, for mail wearers, so you don't need to worry about having to save gold to buy some 378 bracers. You know, you'll get them eventually, but they're certainly, if it's your first character or you're coming back for Firelands and you're trying to catch up, you're not going to want to spend your first 1250 Valor on a pair of bracers. So that's one thing that I would like to see added to this. The other thing really is I would put the 372 weapons on it and have them expensive. The reason I'd put the 372 weapons on is because literally 7 days later, there's going to be your auction houses flooded with 378 BOE epics, because people are going to be trash farming. Remember, literally 7 days later. And those trash weapons that are 378, again, better than any of these that you can get from Heroic Tier 11, they're going to be all over the place. You can get a caster dagger, you can get a polearm, you can get a one-hand, you can get a staff, you can get a crossbow. Most people can get a weapon. Not all, but most. So while I kind of see what they're doing by leaving some of these bigger items off and being like, well, you know, you're still going to have to raid, no one is going to want to go back to Tier 11 to get any of this. Surely the point of the Inferno dungeons is for catch-up gear to help people get into the current content. That's like surely the idea of it, because you can see that they've sort of got it half right. They just need to just get over the line, because who in their right mind is going to try and make a group for Tier 11 Heroic when they can go and farm normal Firelands trash and get a better weapon? I'll be honest, for similar reasons, I'd also put things like Fall of Mortality on there, and even Essence of the Cyclone that comes from Halfus, because, again, a matter of farming trash, and you're going to be able to get a trinket anyway, a 378 item level trinket. All right, that's going to take a couple of weeks, don't get me wrong. Well, maybe not even a couple of weeks. It might only take you a couple of days. I suppose it depends how dedicated you are to the trash farms. But these are literally throw-away items, so throw them on the vendor. So look, overall, what do I think? Going back to what your gear setups will look like, it's not that bad. Weapons should go on there because the 365 weapons are ridiculously expensive, and they should only be for people that can't be bothered to actually farm these dungeons. It's good that you're going to be able to get your 4 set, and your 4 set doesn't need to be 372. You're just fine with it being 359. The fact that the majority of the other item slots are going to be 372 or 379 is actually pretty solid. And ultimately, Blizzard have done all right. It's kind of okay. It's not exciting. They should have done more, but they're probably too busy with Season of Discovery, let's be honest. And if you're watching Blizzard, you know I'm right. Because these dungeons need a little bit more than just 25% health and 100% damage. Just so boring. In this next phase of content, all we're getting is 7 new raid bosses. Having some of these dungeons actually be worth doing during those 7 raid bosses would have been so much fun. Instead, much like the alpha, beta, gammas, these are only useful for people that need gear. And after about a week of Firelands actually being open, the only time you're going to step foot in these is to go on alts. You're not even probably going to Valor Cap using these, because Zul'Gurub and Zolaman at this moment in time still give more Valor. So a final thought when it comes to these being repetitive for people that don't actually need gear. Could it be a good idea to add some sort of money-making stuff on here, you know, like Chaos Orbs or Cloth or Enchanting Mats, a bit like what you're going to spend the Justice points on, but just so if you're building up these Fisher Stone fragments and going in and helping out your guild or helping out random groups, there's a reason for you to go and do what's going to be fairly lackluster content. After doing Grimbertoll, trust me, you barely feel a difference. Like, literally, I was on my lowest geared character. I specifically wanted to go in on my shaman that was 4 hours old. It had been level 85 for 4 hours. And I healed it, which I've not played a resto shaman since. Well, I play one in retail, but I've not played one, you know, in classic at all. Full stop. And obviously it was a joke. So look, they're my thoughts. They're the things I'd like to see changed. They're my issues with some of it, and overall, it's great. There's extra content in Cata. I'm going to be taking advantage of them no matter what because of gearing my new shaman up, but once I've got the gear, that's going to be probably the last time I ever do them because there's not really much reason to. And they've removed the RNG of being able to get your belts or your rings or things like that from Throne to make them RNG to be able to get your belts and your rings and stuff from Inferno dungeons instead. So let me know what you think about that. If you enjoyed the video, as always, like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.